thought it would be important to have sort of a visualization of that coming to you live and direct in real life. So I'd like to welcome Stephen from Carsales and Chris from Civic Data to come up and talk through their collaborative partnership. I'm particularly excited by some of the new words. I like commingling and bunkers. That was good. Some more terms there for us to get excited about. Right, good luck, chaps.
What microphoning system do we use here?
We use the handheld mics, and let's have a look. Turn it on. There's a little secret button at the bottom, if I remember. There we go. You ready to rock? And
hello.
Great. There we go.
Great.
Thanks
So this is the clicker here.
Big green button.
Big green button. Terrific. Okay. Bit of background on Civic Data, just quickly. It started 10 months ago, but I probably spent about 2 years researching the upcoming problems when it comes to privacy, compliance, what's happening with cookie deprecation, etc. So my background is planning and buying media for 10 years on the advertising side, digital media. Then I spent 5 years in the US, where I opened the office for the first tag management system called Tagman. And through that, obviously I dropped a hell of a lot of cookies on people, but I also got to meet a lot of people that were starting programmatic businesses, starting analytics businesses. They were starting all sorts of businesses that use these cookies and tags to track people, which is a word that Apple like to use at the moment, don't they? Unless they talk about their own business. They won't talk about tracking, they'll talk about personalization. But if you want the data, it's tracking. So what we did with Civic Data was I went out and found some very smart marketing technologists, people who are full stack developers, people who are insights experts, people who can understand these new technologies that I researched from the US, who've dealt with CCPA, who've dealt with the incoming 5 new patchwork state laws, because there is no federal legislation for privacy over in the US yet. People who've dealt with GDPR, and they've launched businesses to solve for these problems or to find some kind of workaround that's compliant. So Civic Data, in short, is all about compliant growth. How do we help a marketer and a publisher to continue to grow their business, to grow their revenue, but in a compliant fashion? Everything else, if you want to know, it's on the LinkedIn page. So if you follow Civic Data, one thing that we do is, actually put your hands up. Who has actually read the discussion paper for the Privacy Act changes? Okay, put your hands down. Keep them up, keep them up. Put your hands down if you're a publisher. Put your hands down now if you're a marketer. Okay, great. So who put a submission forward with their, that's a lot less, isn't it? Okay, and who here is involved in privacy? Exactly. So we did put forward a submission paper, which I'm happy to share with you, or if you just go research it, just search Civic Data on those submitted. Okay, I'm going to quickly go forward then. We're talking here about first-party data ID solutions. Now, we heard earlier on from Richard how identity there is part of the clean room conversation. Everyone is looking at CDP at the moment. If you're not, you probably should. I'm going to move quickly from DMP here. The whole point here is about moving from what was this cookie-based kind of third-party story to a sophisticated, owned, first-party customer data hub. The way I like to think about it in my mind is it's not a customer data platform, it's a compliant data platform. How can you attach consent to everyone within that platform that you have? But if you don't know who that person is that's in your customer data platform, how do you actually recognize them across devices, across browsers, to stay true to that consent that they gave you? If someone opts out on Firefox, but then come back in later on a different browser, Chrome, on a different device, and you start following them around for a horrible message, they're going to get pretty pissed off. So identity is absolutely core to everything you do when it comes to using customer data, and it's also core to consent when you start talking about consent platforms in the future. I won't go on too much about the tightening of the privacy side, but obviously this necessity is the necessity is there now. And it's not just now about owning and storing that first-party data. It's about how can you activate and control that data across your entire ecosystem in a compliant way, which is what we're going to talk about in a second with Stephen and Carsales. So we look at it like the hub between the spokes. This is the center of your entire universe. It feeds everything. It feeds your research, your R&D, your partnerships, your in-store partnerships as well. It's not just about the online advertising that people see. It's that part where the customer experience layer, where you interact between the two. So your customer is interacting with you on email, interacting with you on screen, different devices. That's the part where you want to feed and feed the knowledge to that interaction. So why has it become part of CDP planning? CDPs can do ID resolution, but only if they have an ID passed to it. They are not an ID solution in itself. They do not generate an ID for you. Richard, do you have your own? You don't have your own ID solution, right? So the ID is so imperative for understanding who that customer is and activating that data. They're not fit for purpose. They're not owned. Basically, the CDP is not a privacy-preserving technology. The ID management solution, if you are choosing one, must be resettable. If you want to reset the ID, it has to be owned by you guys. It has to be first party. It has to be compliant. And this is an important piece. How do you bridge the anonymous and known customers? So authenticated versus non-authenticated traffic should be a major conversation in this industry right now. One of the biggest problems I think we're all aware with here is the lack of unauthenticated knowledge of visitors that come to publishers, as one example. So I'm going to go here and move on to Stephen. But the point is, how do we move now from we own X amount of identities to how many addressable identities we have? If you've got a massive database of, let's say, 10 million IDs, but you can't actually address them in any way, or if they're not compliant, it's pretty much worth shit all at the moment. Sorry, we're live streaming this, aren't we? Sorry. Okay. So how do we actually do that? Now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to quickly touch on it first, and then Stephen, you can just jump in. On the right-hand side here, in red, is your advertiser. On the left-hand side here is the publisher. In the middle is your unauthenticated user, someone who hasn't actually logged in, someone who hasn't actually said, I am Joe Blogs. Now, down at the bottom, you've got clean room functionality as an example, right? So you might be using a clean room or some type of clean room functionality. But on the left-hand side and the right-hand side, you'll see there's two keywords, internal platforms. Internal platforms could mean anything. It could mean CDP, could mean data lake, could mean whatever platform you want to pass that ID to. But what we're doing here is looking at a way to actually use two advertiser and two sets, so one partner publisher, one partner advertiser, to start to pass and match IDs across in a compliant fashion, but doing it in an unauthenticated way as well as an authenticated way as well. And I'll pass to Stephen to actually explain it.
A lot of theory from young Chris here. I guess what I'm here for is maybe the more practical aspects of it, what we've actually done as Chris talks about what's possible. We've executed this, so we've implemented an ID solution. And this was a very big part of our strategy because we knew that it wasn't enough to just have a CDP. CDP is not an ID solution, but of course it's a central piece of governance and orchestration technology that's going to drive your business going forwards in the future. So the ID solution that we went with is what's here called AdFixus, and having that first party ID was critical. And I'll give you two practical examples. CDP vendors, of which there's a few here, actually price their CDPs based on user profiles. So if you don't have an ID solution that's durable and is first party, purely from a practical perspective, you're going to pay a lot of money for crap. So I think take a step back and think about an ID solution before you do anything else, because that's going to be the first-party cookie that stitches your users, your visitors across your network. And for car sales, we don't just sell cars, we sell bikes, we sell boats, we sell trucks. And so we've got a whole network, and that cross-domain capability to stitch users across our domain in a first-party context was a key ID solution that we needed. Feeding that all into the CDP, and now we have a first-party data set based on cookies that we can activate in unauthenticated partnerships in a data clean room. So that's the first element of practically what comes out of having an ID solution. And then, of course, there's the cost management that comes with your CDPs. And those, to me, are probably the two key messages I wanted to leave you with is you have those components, you can do the first-party matching and activation, and, of course, there's a cost management component to it. What this means in terms of enabling compliant growth, outside of all the words, which you can read by yourselves, is for us, if I look at it practically, if you look at the three macro challenges, which is, of course, third-party cookie deprecation, whatever Apple is doing, whatever Apple does, eventually, ad revenue for them goes up, everybody else's go down, make of that what you will. And, of course, privacy legislation, whatever the government's going to do. All of those things need to be managed at the same time to create compliant partnerships. So you need, the need for the CDP is where that governance framework comes in, and your ability to know, as Chris was saying, exactly what's going on with each user downstream and how you manage that. What comes out of that is compliant partnerships in two sets. Of course, the first-party cookie partnerships and the PII-based partnerships, which I think InfoSerm as well mentioned, in terms of how you get that data together and create matching and activation outcomes. So with the infrastructure in place, you are then able to execute compliant partnerships respecting privacy, and we all need to get our heads around this, but really be able to drive marketing outcomes at scale. And I think for me, those are the two key elements and practical strategies that we're doing to see past all those three macro challenges and remain compliant.
Okay. So one thing that, if anyone wants it, we've just put together a white paper on how to explain to your C-suite these problems, which I'm sure any of you in that kind of area of speaking to the executives in your business about marketing technology, you're finding it hard to do. So one of our kind of key phrases is that the marketing team never studied law, and the compliance and legal team haven't got a clue about MarTech. One of the core challenges that everyone here may be aware of, and it's been discussed a lot around the IAB, are the technical terms that will come under scrutiny with the update to the privacy regulations. So what will be considered information that can identify someone and that can get you in trouble. So one of the core challenges you'll find is if you don't understand, if you're a marketer, what technologies are collecting data across your entire website and that customer experience layer that we mentioned earlier on, you could fall well foul of that law should changes come in. So that's one area, if you're not focusing at the moment, you should be focusing, is how to explain to the executive level, we need to look at privacy as an opportunity. We need to start looking at this as a way to get across all of our customers, ensure they all understand how we're using their data, get across all of our tags we're using that are collecting that data, and make sure every single one of them will stand up under scrutiny. So there is a white paper I could send you, guys, that you can send to your teams that helps explain that. But the key thing here is the compliance isn't a bottleneck, right? So it is something which you should be grabbing onto now. I think the fact that Stephen's up here now talking about how he can work with pretty much anyone here who wants to go and start to advertise to people in a compliant way if they're not ready themselves. Stephen's done that work and he's actually got on top of it. So in a year's time, let's say when everyone else is scrambling around, he's well ahead of the game on that piece. And I think that's the key conversation here, is how can you start to look at all of your technologies and identity attached to that data and make sure the entire stack is compliant, but look at it in a good way as well. The last point there, if you look at CCPA and what's happened in America, if you look at GDPR, is anyone here from Europe? Okay. So did you all receive, when GDPR starting, like 1 month before it came into effect, everyone got 20 emails at once or 30 emails at once saying we'd love to keep a relationship with you even though we haven't spoken to you in 7 years? So if you look at the sample size of Australia, it's a tiny amount of people here. If everyone suddenly has to have permission to keep that data on file, everyone's going to be getting 60, 70 emails at the same time. So if you start your conversation now, you're not going to be lost in that massive kind of snowball of emails that happen for permission later on. So that's one thing to take away from here. Let's get ahead of it. That's it. Yeah. Any questions, I guess?
Excellent. Thank you. Now, I just want to check if there are any questions. Okay. I mean, I suppose, I must admit, oh, hang on, we do have one. You have to shout, sorry.
Who are you? Sorry.
We do not know who you are. We do.
What are your principles around how you are trying to, I'm trying to phrase the question, sorry. Are you trying to pursue more people logging in, or are you trying to pursue actively not doing so? Because I think a lot of the stuff always, we focus the discussion around technology, not necessarily what are our overarching principles around how we are looking at privacy. So yeah. I've been participating in doing that and pushing people to log in to watch content. Fine, it's worked, it's been very good for us. But is that a sustainable path moving forward? Because this just becomes a conversation around technology, ID replacements. It's still the same thing.
Yeah.
It's an ID that a person who's just a normal human being is not going to feel super comfortable with, regardless of whether it's opt-in or not.
So just for the benefit of those online, it sounds like the question's around, in terms of the partnerships and the audience you seek, whether it's just sheer scale or if there's a qualitative aspect to that. In terms of the relationship you wish to form?
Look, it's a very practical question because it's it's something that we've thought about as well. Where we've landed, it's both, Josh, because of course there's always going to be levels of execution, and the logged-in experience is a level of execution, and it gives you a certain level of capability, of interaction, of targeting that you're then going to do, and the level of and the consent that's going to come with that. But you cannot ignore the unauthenticated person as well, because the reality is that's going to be the vast percentage of the audience that's going to come to the site. So I think it's both, and then that's why that first-party ID solution is important, because the two things then don't separate. You do need the consent framework that's going to manage that first-party cookie, and it's now in a first-party context. And what I often talk about, one of the unintended consequences of the deprecation of the third-party cookie is things like what me and you are allowed to do. We have a first-party trusted relationship with our customers. If we create the user experience in such a way that it respects us, of course there's going to be a consent. Consent is going to be given. So we are within every right to do that. But actually, the dependency has actually been on the third-party cookie to execute that. Now, we're big supporters. It was madness and it needs to go. That's a good thing for publishers. But it's both. If you get that first-party cookie in, you can then execute those first-party partnerships with whoever is in that frame, which is going to be the vast majority. But absolutely, there is the logged-in experience that's also going to be very important. So it has to be both, and there will be marketing outcomes driven by both of those things. And you do have to be thinking about what's the consent framework and what's the governance model for both of those things.
Excellent. That is a fantastic answer to a good question. Thank you very much. We are